Hello. Today I will introduce the rules of the business board game called Mad Market, which can be played by 2 to 6 players. Game setup. Place the game board in the middle of the table. Place the player tokens on the start space. Put 6 markers on the 6th space of the stock market and 1 marker on the starting space of the stock market forecast. Place the game dice next to the board. Set up the supply of money, companies, luxury goods, and stocks. Place the police, security guard, black market, and stockbroker tokens nearby. Each player starts with 500 in-game money. Game objective. The player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins. Points can only be obtained by buying luxury goods cards. For example, a jet card costs 2,000 money and will be worth 15 victory points at the end of the game. During a turn, you can purchase only 1 luxury good card. Gameplay. Select the first player randomly. Roll the dice and move your token forward the number of spaces rolled. Before taking actions, adjust the stock market values. The result of white die will increase the value, but result of black one will decrease it by 1 space. For example, rolling a 2 with a white die will increase the value of red shares by 1 space, and rolling a 6 with a black die will decrease the value of yellow shares. Rolling equal numbers won't change the values. Then, advance the stock market forecast marker by 1 space and execute the indicated stock value changes. During their turn, players can buy and sell shares whose prices are listed in the stock market zone. There is no limit to how many shares can be bought or sold in a single turn. Purchased shares cannot be sold on the same turn, and sold shares cannot be bought during same turn as well. Buying shares increases their value, while selling decreases it by 1 space. There are a total of 6 types of shares in the game, which each have a total of 300 units. There are different types of spaces on the game board, where players can perform various actions when landing on them. Companies. When landing on a company space, a player can purchase that company for the listed price and receive a company card. If another player lands on your company's space, they must pay you half the company's price. When your token passes the starting space, you receive 5 stocks for each owned company that does not belong to the holding. If there are no shares left in the supply, the owner receives the current shares value in cash. On their turn, players can sell their companies for half of their price, which go to auction pile and later will be auctioned. Holding. After acquiring 3 companies of the same type, they become a holding. Other players landing on your holding company will pay the full company price to you, and when your token passes the starting space, you will receive 30 shares of that type. Only the holding owner can trade these types of shares, therefore if one player acquires a holding, all other players must sell that type of shares immediately to the bank for market price without adjusting the values. On their turn, players can buy a company for 100 shares from the bank, even when they're not standing on them. Moreover, it is possible to acquire a holding for 300 shares of that type. There are a total of 18 companies or 6 different holdings in the game. There are 4 types of negative spaces on the game board. Personal stock crisis. Landing on this space will cause you to lose half of your own shares to the bank, rounded up in favor of the player. Stock market crisis. The player who lands on this space rolls 1 die. The number rolled determines which color stocks will plummet to the bottom. Vacation. Landing here causes you to lose half of your money to the bank, rounded up in favor of the player. Casino. Pay 300 money to the bank. If a player doesn't have enough money to pay their dues, they must first sell their own companies to the bank for half of the price. Sold companies go directly to the auction pile, which will be discussed later. If sold companies don't cover the dues, then the player must sell their own shares for the market price. If even that isn't enough to cover the debt, the player is eliminated from the game. Other spaces. When one player lands on the auction space, an auction is held to all players for the companies that were sold to the bank for half of the price. The auction is held separately for each company. If there are no companies in the auction, players compete for the first available company, starting from the starting space. The player who bids the highest amount wins. The stockbroker space allows you to purchase your own stockbroker token for 100 game money. With this token, you can adjust stock values by 1 space during your turn. You can have up to 2 stockbrokers in the game, but you can only purchase one at a time. Once hired, a stockbroker remains for the entire game, and you can adjust stock exchange values each turn. When landing on the black market space, you can purchase a black market token for 100 money, and when you land again on this space later in the game, you can sell it for 1000 money. A player can only have one token at a time. When you land on SWAT space, while having black market token, you must fight against police units. If you lose the black market token and must pay 1000 money to the bank. If you don't have enough to cover the fine, you must sell companies and then shares. To fight against the police, you need security guards. Without them, you immediately lose and must pay 1000 money to the bank. You can purchase security guards when landing on this security guard space. The cost of one security guard is 30 in-game money, and you can have up to 10 of them. During the fight, for each security guard token, roll both dices. If the white value is higher than the black, congratulations, you won and can remove one police token from the fight. If the result is the opposite, you lose a security guard token. In case of a tie, one fighter token is removed from each side. The fight ends when one of the sides loses all their fighting units. In case fighters depletes at the same time, you win. The first time you land on the police space, you must defend against 2 officers, later, against 3, 4, and finally 5 officers. You can also try to take over opponent's company with your security guards. To do that, you must land on that space when there is an opponent on it. If you don't want to try to take over, you'll pay the usual amount of money to the owner, and the game will continue. If you decide to risk and take over opponent's company, you start the battle between your and opponent's security guards where the usual fight rules apply. Your die will be white, and the opponent's black. The first one to lose all their security guard tokens loses the fight. In case you lose them simultaneously, the defender wins. If the attacker wins, the loser must hand over their owned company, for which the battle took place. If the attacker loses, he must pay double taxes to the owner. If the defending player had no security guards during the attack, the company is immediately lost after the battle was initiated. Game end. When one of the players collects 35 points, finish the current round and count your victory points. The player with the most points wins the game. In case of a tie, the amount of money each player has determines the winner. If there is still a tie, players must sell their shares. The player with the most money wins.